Hi, welcome to Rich Dad's World. Very important seminar today. Very discussion. We have Mark Moss, but this is the hot topic we're going to be talking about. If you're not getting richer today, you're the problem. Because the more it is today, the rich are getting richer than ever before. And if you're not, it's because you've been drinking from the straw of misinformation. So Rich Dad's World doesn't sell anything except education, information, but more importantly, how do you profit from good information? And so that's what Rich Dad's World all about. Let me say it again. The rich are getting richer. Are you? If you're afraid today, it's because you got sucked into misinformation.
Right.
You haven't gone macro. You haven't studied history.
Yep.
And exactly what Mark Moss is saying today is going on in Europe today. That's what happened at the Weimar Republic, which gave rise to a man named Adolf Hitler. And this is our time today. Now, the good news is, if you follow what I said in this book here, you'd be richer. I have never made so much money. I'm in the same markets all of you are at, but I just don't follow the same stupid advice from poor people, like my poor dad.
Yeah.
They're not bad people. They're just highly educated poor people, or they're salespeople. Nothing wrong with salespeople. We all have something to sell. Just hear me out. If you're afraid today, you're following bad financial advice and education.
Yeah.
Please hear me out. And then this here is probably the biggest thing I'm not terrified of, but I think we're going to go down with this one, is who stole my pension. The idea of government workers like my poor dad, school teacher, police officers, firefighters, they all have a government pension. And what they're finding out today is those pensions are empty. You got ripped off. So I wrote this book here a while ago with Ted Siddell. Ted Siddell is the biggest whistleblower in the pensions. And the reason this book hits home for me is after I got through flying in the Marine Corps, my poor dad wanted me to fly for either Hawaiian Airlines or United Airlines. And I said, I'm done flying. He says, no, but airlines have a good pension, safe, secure job. And the reason this book hits home to me is my friends who flew for United Airlines found out the hard way their pensions were stolen. So they're back at work right now. Because if you think it's the economy that's the problem, you're solely wrong. The problem is your education. Guys like me are making more money hand over fist. I don't pay much in taxes. And I'm quite happy with the economy. So the economy actually takes place inside your head. So what Mark Moss is saying, you have to go back in time to see history. Anything else you want to say, Mark?
Yeah, a couple of things I'd like to add to that. So, I think what a lot of people do these days is they don't want to build their own education. Maybe they don't think they need to, and maybe let's give them the benefit of the doubt. A lot of people don't think they need to, because they can just outsource their thinking. Today, everybody trusts the experts, right? Rather than rely on information that they could build themselves. And so when we're talking about the financial system specifically, and everybody has their pensions, through their work, they're investing through their 401ks and they're having their matching funds, which, by the way, if your employer wants to match your funds, that's free money. Go ahead and take them up on it. But for the most part, you don't want to be in their game, right? That's their game. And that's where they extract wealth from. So, and I want to give you a couple of just concrete examples of this. So, if we look at your financial advisor, and whether at Charles Schwab or Fidelity or wherever they're at, and they're going to tell you a couple things. They'll say like, it's not timing the market, it's time in the market. You should just always stay in because it always goes up, but not necessarily, as Robert was making the case earlier. And if we go back through history, we can see, just looking at the S&P 500, for example, from 1968, the market crashed. And it took all the way until 1992 just to get back to even, 25 years. So if you're trying to retire in that 25-year gap, it was going to be very painful. And again, from 2000 to 2015, it dropped in 2000, took 15 years just to get back to even. So while your financial advisor might be factually correct, they're a little intellectually dishonest by telling you that. And these as Robert was making the case, they're really salespeople just trying to sell you the products they're in. But
Robert Kiyosaki is the best-selling author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a 10 Roberts free virtual wealth building event. Claim your free access now at richdadfree.com. Go to richdadfree.com.
But here's the real, we'll call it sinister. Robert, you said I'm pretty good at sniffing out these sinister plans. Here's the real sinister part to this. And this is where you really need to be paying attention, because where we're going is not the same as where we're coming from. We are at the end. We're witnessing an 80 to 100 year sovereign debt crisis. We haven't seen that happen in the West before. And what that means is that in the United States and the rest of the Western developed world, we have gotten to a point where our debt to GDP is over 125%. When you get to that point, there's 4 options to get out. You can default, but no government with a money printer will default. You can steal the wealth through taxation, but even if America took everybody's money, they wouldn't have enough to pay the debt. So that's not going to work. Really, the only option is to print money, right? That's the only option. And they do something called financial repression. And this is a very key piece you all need to be aware of. The IMF put out a paper in 2015 explaining how financial repression works. And what they do is, to Robert's point, they take over the pensions, they take over all these retirement accounts, and they put them into the assets they want them to be in. You don't think they are, but what they do is by keeping bond yields lower than what inflation is. So they'll let inflation run hot, keep printing money, but keep bond yields low. So you're making your 2-3% on your bonds. You think you're doing okay, but you're really losing money that way. And so that's the sinister part. And if you just outsource your thinking, you listen to the sales reps that tell you what to do, you're going to be stuck in that game. And so I think what Robert likes to do, as well as I do, is let's play outside that game. We can build wealth and assets outside the game. We don't have to play along with that. And I think that's probably the big picture that people should be aware of.
Exactly. And that's why financial education is not just financial advice from somebody who's a salesperson. I mean, I just crack up because I'm a real estate person primarily. And they're telling me, oh, but the price per square foot's going up and all this stuff. I said, well, what about the debt to GDP? And these real estate agents have no idea what I'm talking about. And I said, and exactly as Mark says, it's 100 years, but the last 100 years ago was a thing called 1929. And we're coming quick.
Yeah, we're almost right there. Yeah.
And people are still saying the same thing that got in trouble with. But I think this is the most important thing, is that Mark has the stats on the 60s. What happened in 1929 when the market crashed? The Dow was at 381.
Yeah.
It took 25 years.
Yeah.
To get back to, it took till 1954 to get back to 381 Dow.
Right.
And today, I don't know how far the S&P, the Dow, the NASDAQ will fall. But the baby boomers, my generation, if they're afraid, it's because they've been lied to, knowingly lied to, because we've known this for years.
And one of the big things they've been lied to is, to the point you made, and you were called a scammer or whatever when you wrote the book, is that your house is not an asset, right? And so they've been lied to of what assets really are. And this is something I know, Robert, you and I have talked about extensively in the last year or two, really defining what assets are, the business assets and things like that. And so people aren't buying assets. They're letting someone manage their financial, their money inside this financial casino, inside the stock market, where they're using financial repression to steal from you, as opposed to getting outside of that system and building assets. And so assets are something that puts money in your pocket. And the one thing,
whether you work or not, assets put money in your pocket, whether you work or not. And the reason I say that, well, they buy a rental property, but they're still managing it. So I don't do any of that.
Right.
The key to my success is complete laziness.
Yeah. So, and the other thing I'd like to say too is with the stock market is that when it comes to business, when it comes to competing, when it comes to playing sports or being good in business or being good investing, everybody should have an edge. They should have something that they know that most people don't have, some nuance, some sort of skill. And nobody has an edge in the stock market. Maybe the high frequency traders on Wall Street with hundreds of billions of dollars to throw around, they have an edge. You don't have an edge competing against that. Now, if you're asking yourself, what is my edge? That means you don't have one. And so you need to have one. And I think that real estate is probably the easiest place to get an edge, right? Because it's easy. Everyone understands it if you just spend the time to build that education.
Well, let me say something even worse. I don't think people realize is that if you're in the stock market, I don't care which part of it, NASDAQ and S&P, you're trading against artificial intelligence. You're trading against algorithms. You don't have a prayer against those guys. It's like what my little iPhone does, I can't do. That'd be like me trying to do more than my iPhone. And so all of these freaking idiots, my generation, the boomers, they're going, oh, I'm just following my financial planner's advice. I'm in it for the long term. But you're trading against an algorithm, artificial intelligence. You don't have a prayer. You do not have a prayer.
Yeah, you don't have a prayer and you don't control the game. The game is set up in their favor. So another example would be back to 1933, Act 6102. So gold had been money for all of history, all of known history. Gold was money. It was very hard to transport around. So then we put it in the bank and they gave us these things called paper certificates or paper gold certificates or IOUs. And anytime I want, I can go to the bank and I could get my gold back for that paper claim, that paper dollar. What happened is the bank started printing too many of those paper certificates, and there was more of those paper certificates than there were actually gold in the bank. And so then the government said, you know what? 1933, 61, Executive Order 6102, we're just going to seize all your gold. We're going to steal all your gold. And here's even the worst part, as if that wasn't bad enough. At the time, gold was redeemable. Well, 20 of these paper claims, $20 were worth 1 ounce of gold. So you could always redeem that. When the government took all the gold and seized it and made it illegal to own it, they said, don't worry though. We're going to give you your $20 per ounce. So you're all good, right? But what they did is immediately turn around and revalue it at $35 an ounce. So not only did they steal your gold, then they instantly devalued you right off the bat. Now, that would have been the worst thing ever if all of your wealth would have been in their game, in their system. But if you owned a ranch and you had, 100,000 heads of cattle and you had your land and you had whatever, that didn't even affect you, right? You weren't even affected. And so that's what I'm talking about by playing their game versus playing a different game.
Yeah. And that's why we have Rich Dad's World, because I'll say it again, your biggest asset is between your left ear and your right ear. It's also your biggest liability. And really, it depends upon who did you listen to. Did you listen to people like my poor dad? Go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, get out of debt, buy a house, and invest for the long term in the stock market. And if you've done that, you're one of those people who's worried today. And let me say it again. Today, I've made more money than ever before. And I'm glad Mark was man enough to admit he lost it in 2008 because what he lost was transferred to me. I thought after 2008 crashed, I thought I died and went to heaven because it's not for the long term. Your profit is made when you buy, not when you sell. So as soon as the real estate market and everything crashed in 2008, as soon as it crashed, I borrowed $300 million. I went into debt. Now, who's that other character who says live debt free? Well, for most people, that's good advice. No, I don't mean to discount him. I don't keep forgetting his name. He's a good friend of mine. But
Dave Ramsey, if we want to say his name.
Most people should live debt free.
Yeah.
If you don't understand what Mark is saying, what I'm saying, but let me say this to you. Right now, the rich are getting richer.
Yeah.
And if you're afraid of losing money, if you're sleepless, it's because somebody's screwed with your brain. So your biggest liability is your past information put in your head. Like the term, I call it milk, M-I-L-K. More information, less knowledge.
Yeah. And
people are so highly informed, but they don't have the education to process the information. So they listen to MSNBC who hate Trump, and then CNBC who tells you, just hold for the long term. The market always comes back. And instead of calling it, back in my time, it wasn't called stimmy checks. It was called helicopter money. And so what Bernanke did was he says, we have helicopter money. And sure enough, as soon as this thing went down, right after COVID, right after the repo market crashed, helicopter money came out. And I heard the first thing they paid off was their credit cards, and they didn't invest their money. And nothing wrong with paying for credit cards, but when people don't know what to do with their money, they do more stupid things. So your biggest liability is your past education. Or what did your mommy and daddy tell you to do? You know, that's why I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad 25 years ago. My poor dad was a highly educated poor man, PhD, poor, helpless, and desperate. So every time he told me to get my MBA and then my PhD, bye. And fly for the airlines because they have a good pension. And my classmates who did that are not that unemployed, but they had to start another business because they lost their pensions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Kiyosaki, co-host of the Rich Dad Radio Show. And I want to thank today's sponsor, our friends at Gold Alliance. You know, we should all be concerned about high inflation, a looming recession, the very troubled banking system, and out-of-control spending in Washington. And the fact is, during every major crisis in U.S. history, many of those who failed to prepare watched their savings, investments, and retirement funds plummet, while others with the foresight to own gold helped preserve their wealth and purchasing power. Now, we're facing several major crises at once, and we may soon face even more economic turmoil. So please don't wait. Consider gold and put yourself on the road to financial peace of mind. The new free 2023 Gold Guide from our friends at Gold Alliance can show you how. Just visit www.freegoldguide.com/Robert or call 1-800-473-4585. Republican Governor and conservative commentator Mike Huckabee says Gold Alliance is the only gold provider he recommends to his friends and family. Please visit freegoldguide.com/Robert or call now at 1-800-473-4585. Thank you.
Feeling powerless over current events and your financial future? Financial freedom is your freedom. Robert Kiyosaki is the best-selling author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Over 40 million people have taken Robert's advice. Now it's your turn. Attend Robert's free virtual wealth building event. Claim your free access now at richdadfree.com. Don't wait, access is limited. Go to richdadfree.com. That's richdadfree.com.
And that's this book here, Who Stole My Pension? So I'm not just saying I'm a forecaster. I can prove it with my assets. Rich Dad's Prophecy, Why the Biggest Stock Market is Still Coming. This was written after 2008, and that crash is now here. And if you're not getting richer, you better listen to what Rich Dad's World has to say and almost deprogram your poor person's brain.
Yeah. What I'd like to do, and you said you liked it that I would admit that I made mistakes. Of course, I've made lots of mistakes. We all have. And what I'd like to do is, it's always better to learn from someone else's mistakes. So a couple of lessons that I learned, unfortunately, the hard way, it cost me tens of millions of dollars. They don't have to cost you that. I'll give them to you for free here. But a couple of things that Robert said that were really good. First off, you make your money when you buy in real estate. And so I wasn't doing this, but what a lot of people got caught in 2008 was not making money when they bought. So they would stand in line at a new track development. They'd buy 3 homes, pre-order, and then they'd hope, they'd pray, they'd cross their fingers that when those homes would be built, they'd be worth more. Like, that's not what we're talking about. That's making your money, hopefully speculating later down the road. And that was a problem for a lot of people. Where I got caught personally was I was trying to make my money when I buy, but I got caught up in the whole mess. And what really got me was that I wasn't able to carry the properties. And so one of the big lessons that I've learned, and I always try to relate to other people, is never become a forced seller, right? So I was forced to sell some of my properties because I couldn't carry them. Today, they're worth many times more. If I could have just held them, I would have been amazing. But I was forced to sell. And so we want to think about making our money when we buy. We want to think about that asset putting money into our pocket. And that is what gives us the ability to hold those assets over a long period of time so that we're not really at the whims of what the market is doing. We can continue to hold those assets, continue to have that cash flow coming in. And if I would have learned that lesson early on, I would have been in a much different situation. And so what I had to do is obviously I learned there's that saying, I never lose. Either I win or I learn. And I learned. I didn't win, so I learned on that. And one of the things that I learned is exactly that. And so once I started getting back into real estate investing again, I was making sure. At first, I was a little timid. Right, whenever you fall off the horse, right, you're a little scared, and so I was a little timid. And I started investing into first trust deeds, and I'd only get into them at 60%. Of the value. So that way I had this big buffer. But what I also did is I made sure I would only loan on properties I would actually want to own. And my criteria was, one, were they worth more than what I had to take them back for? But most importantly, two, how much cash flow did they provide me? And that way, if I had to own those houses, would I be able to hold them forever? And would I want to? And if those answers were yes, then I would go ahead and do the loan. And over the years, I've had to take many of those properties back, and many of them I still own today. But that was a big lesson that I learned, and hopefully you guys can learn from my mistakes and not have to figure that out the hard way.
Well, the object is you have to make mistakes. And that's why most teachers are poor, because they're taught not to make mistakes. They teach you not to make mistakes. And so you follow the advice of gurus, and YouTube is freaking full of really smart guys like Mark Moritz and George Gammon, Ken McElroy, and people I know personally who practice what they teach. But there are some really big charlatans who are famous. And I think, we won't mention their names, Mark, but boy, I tell you, when you look at con men in the dictionary or bullshit artists, their pictures are in the dictionary. They talk about things that are absolutely, in my opinion, dangerous. And what they're really doing is they're fishing for your investment. So that, by the way, I got this deal here. And one guy, I won't mention his name, he says, what you should do is start with a $25 million apartment house. Start.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. We won't mention his name, but I know. Yeah.
And I took him to the frickin' cleaners on that one. I just said, that's the worst advice ever. But what I understand, because you and I have been in the game. Well, I've been in the game a lot longer than you. It's called, oh, by the way, I happen to have that. If you don't want to find a $25 million apartment house, I have one you can be a partner in. So it's kind of, you set you up that get you kind of hungry, but then they put you into their deal.
The problem with that deal,
I have no problem with that, except the way they do it. We have Rich Dad's World. Your best defense is get educated so you can make a better decision. Who's real, who's fake, and who's a con man.
I think there's a time and a place for everything. What I learned, unfortunately, with my expensive lessons, is that there's no such thing as good and bad timing. There's good and bad there's good and bad strategies. So if you have the right strategy, you can always find an opportunity, no matter kind of what's going on. But the problem that I have with those types of opportunities, and there's a time and a place for them for sure, but especially for some of these younger people or entry level people that we're talking to right now, is what Robert's saying. And what I'm trying to say is it's all about building your own education through your own experiences. And if you just give your money to your financial advisor and let them do whatever they want, you're not learning anything. And that's no different than giving it to one of these gurus who's going to put into a $25 million building. You're not learning anything. And so it would be better off, I think, in my opinion, if you would start small. Learn to do this on your own. Yes, you might make them a couple of mistakes. They won't be as big because you start small, and then you work your way up and learn it. Take control for yourself. So for me, when I got hit hard in 2008, because I had already done so much in real estate, I had done so many businesses, I got wiped out. I had to dig myself out of a hole, but I had the education now. I had the knowledge of having done it before, so I was able to build it back pretty quickly and multiple times bigger. But if I had just outsourced it all the time and never had learned that, then I would have been stuck. I probably never would have come back from that.
Yeah. So what you're saying is accurate. So this is a difference here. ESBNEI. I invest on this side. Mark's more on this side here. So I'm on this side here. Nothing right or wrong. But the thing is, when you go to Rich Dad's world, I would check this side out, because I don't need money, and I don't invest in other people's products. I create my own. I am an entrepreneur. The other thing I'd like to pass on is because in 1974, several things happened. ERISA was passed, and ERISA stood for Employee Retirement Income Security Act. It's like today, Inflation Protection Act, whatever they say. Whatever the government says the name of their project is the opposite.
It's the opposite,
The
yeah.
Employee Retirement Income Security Act became the 401k. And today, all the little boomers are going, oh my God, oh, Mr. Bill, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? Because one of the biggest X's I saw, Mark, because you're a lot younger than me, in 1974, every school teacher was becoming a financial planner. I sat there going, you've got to be kidding me. And my rich dad said, talk about the poor leading the blind. And that hasn't changed. And then in the later 70s and all that, when real estate took off, everybody became real estate agents. You know, like I told the story of standing in line at Safeway, and the sales checkout girl says, here's a card. I'm a real estate agent now. I went, time to get out. That's all it meant to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, your greatest asset is your brain.
Yep.
It's also your greatest liability. And think about it this way. Guys like me are getting richer than ever before, while other people are losing. Which side do you want to be on? That's why of Rich Dad's world.
And the game is being tilted in your favor if you're willing to put the time into yourself to build
on
up
this
that.
side, it's rigged in your favor, and this side is rigged against you.
Right. And
this is the go to school, become a doctor crowd, ES, and the smart guys.
Yeah. And as we have, you can see it all around us. Our culture now today builds up these experts, and even CNN was running headlines like, don't do your own research, right? Like, I mean, it's just the most insane things, but we're seeing more and more people want to just outsource their thinking to so-called experts, whether that be to their education or to their health or to their money or whatever it is. And so that's your opportunity. If you decide to move ahead and build your own education, as Robert said, what's between your ears, then you have that edge. Most people don't think about that. And then we're going into this situation right now, as we've talked about now with the stock market problems that we have, the financial repressions the government's going to have to do, that we could really see, I think as Warren Buffett said, that the stock markets are efficient at moving money from the inpatient to the patient. And so these markets are very good about moving money. Wealth transfers, just like in 2008 when I lost a bunch of money and other people made it. And so what we can do
Mark,
is
thank you for donating to my cause.
Yeah, right. Fun fact, not so fun for me, but interesting trivia. This building that I'm actually broadcasting from right now, I built it from the ground up. I bought a piece of dirt. I built this building from the ground up, and I lost it, and now I'm renting from these people. So, I get reminded of that every day.
Hey, everybody. I want you to listen to this man. He's an honest man. I mean, that's our discussion tomorrow is what my teacher was, our Buckminster Fuller, created the geodesic dome. And he says, mistakes are the most important thing you can do. Because in every mistake, it's pointing out what you didn't know. And so when a man admits or a woman admits he or she made a mistake, they're getting smarter. And they lie. They don't learn a damn thing. The mistakes get bigger. So, Mark, I commend you.
Yeah. We have to be honest.
I made mistakes. We all make mistakes.
Yeah. And the faster you move and the bigger things you attempt, the more mistakes and the bigger those mistakes will be. But it's okay. You only lose if you quit going. The cliche is, you only lose if you don't get back up, right? But you have to just kind of keep going. Obviously, you're trying to not make mistakes that kill you or wipe you out completely. And so that was one of the big lessons that I had to learn as well. But we're going into this period in time where we're going to have this massive wealth transfer on our hands for a couple of reasons. One, as Robert alluded to, with the demographics. So we have this demographics. We're going to have all this wealth from the baby boomers transferred down. So there's going to be the transfer from that. But then we're also having a wealth transfer because of the the crash that's coming. And we're not sure if it's an inflationary or deflationary crash. We can make our guesses, but either way, the system is going to be crashing and it's going to be transferring wealth to the people who are prepared from the people who are not prepared. And so you are going to have the opportunity. You do have the opportunity, like Robert's saying, he's making more money now than ever. You have this opportunity right now and will continue to have even bigger opportunities if you build that education and if you're prepared for that to happen.
Yeah. So I'll give you the secret to my success. I don't invest in anything that the Fed or Wall Street prints. Anything they can print, I don't want. So that's why today I don't own oil stock. I own oil wells. And so what happened when Biden took the Keystone XL pipeline off the line, I felt horrible because I was selling oil, not stocks, at $30 a barrel. And immediately the price of oil went from $30 to $130. The good news is I've never made so much money in such a short time, most of it tax-free because oil is not taxed. I don't pay taxes legally. But what happened was there will always be poor, unfortunately. I think in the Bible it says the poor will always be amongst us. There will always be poor people. But when Biden took the pipeline off, the price of oil went to $130 a barrel. That destroyed the middle class. And now the stock market's coming down, real estate's coming down, and the middle class, aka the baby boomers, most of them who went to school, have been misinformed. They're a part of they got sucked into the thundering herd of school teachers who became financial planners. And then later on, they became real estate agents. And they wonder why they're in trouble today. And the guys like me are getting richer. So the reason we have Rich Dad's World is you have a choice. What data do you put in your head? And just remember this, if you think you can beat the stock market, you're trading against a machine. You're trading against artificial intelligence. So if you think you can beat the machine, more power to you. But I still can't figure out how my iPhone can get me from point A to point B. It just tells turn left, turn right, turn left, turn right. But how does this thing know? You know what I mean? So the power of artificial intelligence today is massive. You want to trade against that? Holy mackerel.
I don't. I don't. It doesn't work. One thing I was thinking about, you were talking about earlier about the macroeconomics and how I'm a student of history and macroeconomics.
Wait, and Mark, my respect for you is on the macro. I mean, you have studied this to the nth degree.
Yeah.
But it guides you on the micro level, right?
Right. And that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, imagine if you were watching a movie and they had a time machine and they went back in time, right? And they say, oh, no, don't touch that. Don't touch that. One little change today is going to make a massive change in the future. And so that's kind of what macroeconomics are. We can see like, oh, this new law was passed, this new bill was passed, and then we can basically imagine what's going to happen in the future. So an example would be that they decide to shut down all the energy. Biden cancels all the oil pipelines. Europe shuts down all their natural gas. And what happens to energy prices? They go through the roof because of supply demand. We still need the demand, but we have less supply. We have a bunch of globalists, but they all kind of work together and they all kind of have this vision, this globalist vision, one of which is to reduce the energy consumption of the world. We need energy to stay alive. Without energy, we all die. So when you reduce the energy available and then you reduce the food available, what do you think happens? It's obviously not good. And so all around the world, we've seen in Sri Lanka, they cut out the use of fertilizer, which allows them to grow less food. And then they have no more exports because they can't grow food and the whole country collapses. Holland, they're cutting back on all the food. They're not letting the farmers grow cows anymore. A couple countries have now said that you won't be allowed to get financing on new cars like within the next 5 years. Yeah, so they're using the banking policy to then push these policies through economic policies known as ESG. So we have like social credit scores for us as individual people, and then we have ESG scores are for businesses and corporations. And so if they don't follow along and they don't play along with these mandates that they've declared, then Mark Carney, who's one of the most influential people in the world, he said there'll be, quote, economic roadkill, meaning there'll just be no funding for them. You can't get any money for them, like forget it. And so when you look at these types of policies going into place, then you just try to think about it for a little bit. And what will that mean for things? And that really allows you to kind of stay one step ahead of them in investing. And real estate would be no different. If there's no law and order, people will leave. That's just the way it goes. And so they're leaving in droves. They're going to Florida and Texas, right? So if I was buying real estate, I would look at these types of trends and go, wait a minute. So they're passing laws that are going to reduce law and order. People are going to want to leave there. Where will they want to go? And you can, you just watch these macroeconomic trends. You see what they're doing, and then you can easily see where you should be positioning yourself.
And so everybody, I'd like you to listen to Mark Moss. He's an honest man, tells them, but his research into the dark side, per se, whatever it is, the shadows of the world are vital. So you have a book out, the Uncommunist Manifesto.
The Uncommunist Manifesto, yeah. And so,
what is that book about?
Yeah, so unfortunately, Marxism or communism is an idea that just won't die, and it probably got its origins in the French Revolution, and then really Karl Marx kind of put it all together in a book titled The Communist Manifesto. And I think it's super important today more than ever because we saw what happened when the Bolshevik Revolution. Oh, you got it right there, yeah. We saw what happened with the Bolshevik Revolution when they tried it, and 25 million people died. And we saw what happened when Mao tried it in China, and 50 million people died. But what we're seeing today is it's just Marxism. You'll own nothing and be happy. That's straight out of Marxism. And as a matter of fact, in the Communist Manifesto book, Karl Marx wrote, "If I was to summarize communism in one statement, it's the abolition of private property." I think this book is what I did here is I took this same book, the Communist Manifesto, same 4 chapters, same context, but just wrote it in a different lens. It's about an hour read. It's an easy read. And so it's really meant not to rebut each piece by piece, but rather just provide an alternative to really encourage people and really highlight the problems that we can see in the original Marxism that still won't go away, and really highlight a new way that I think the world could go. And hopefully it will.
Well, I said in this book here, the Capitalist Manifesto, which juxtaposition to this.
Yeah.
This was written in 1848. And the reason this is so big, all this book is the quotes of all the times we were warned it was coming. And it's in our school system. I mean, today, parents who question the academic system are labeled terrorists.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? And then, a progressive income tax is essential for communism.
An essential bank.
My father was a labor union guy. And what Marx says, workers of the world unite.
Yeah.
That was poor debt. So that's what this book is about here. We were warned all these years, but our academic system doesn't teach us anything about money. I think that's not a mistake. I think it's intentional.
It's definitely intentional because they don't want you to have this education so you can take care of yourself.
Yeah.
If you can take care of yourself and you have a family and friends and a community that supports you, you don't need the state.
Yeah. And what it is really simple. A capitalist, a pure capitalist produces a better product or a better service at a better price. They serve a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then a socialist takes from the capitalists and gives it to people who don't produce. You're a great teacher. I mean, your macro stuff is unbelievable. Your insights, your depth of what's going on the dark side, priceless. And just think of it this way. Right now, if you're worried, it's because you have been misinformed. If we don't arm ourselves with real financial education, then it's our fault because you'll always be a sucker. If you believe you're a financial planner or a real estate agent, they may be good people, but how highly educated are they? Think about that. And you have a chance to get educated. Listen to Rich Dad's World. But today, the rich are getting richer than ever before. no matter what happens. So that's what Rich Dad's world is about. If you're not getting rich, you either listen to Twitter or some bad financial advisor. So Mark, thank you very much for your wisdom and your genius and your dedication to education. It's amazing, your in-depth knowledge of what's going on the dark side.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate it. Always a pleasure hanging out with you.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.